In the headlines this evening, officials from South Korea and China meet today on regional issues, including Washington's possible deployment of its missile defense system to South Korea. The country's 7th Innovation Center opens its doors, this time in the nation's second-largest city of Busan. This center is in cooperation with retail giant Lotte Group. And 3 British men who allegedly tried to join the extremist group Islamic State are now back in London. We have these stories and more coming right up. Stay with us. It's 6 in the evening on Monday, March 16th here in Korea. You're watching Early Edition at 6. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. We begin with the back-to-back diplomacy for Seoul with 2 of its closest partners this week, China and the United States.
That's right. Watchers say Seoul could find itself in a tough spot with some controversial issues on the table. Arirang's Hwang Sung-hee has this story.
Korea could find itself tangled between 2 superpowers following its back-to-back meetings with China and the United States this week. The touchy subjects topping the agenda are the possible deployment of the Washington-led THAAD missile defense system in South Korea and Seoul's participation in China's Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Following talks with its South Korean counterpart Lee Kyung-soo on Monday, Chinese Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs Liu Jianchao said they'd had a very open and honest discussion about the THAAD deployment. Liu added that Beijing hopes Seoul will consider China's interest and concerns about the matter. Beijing is against the deployment because of concerns that its radar system, which can cover 1,000 kilometers, could be used to monitor mainland China. Although Seoul and Washington say there have been no official discussions on THAAD, the U.S. Forces Korea said last Thursday that it conducted site surveys on where to deploy the missile defense system. As for Seoul's participation in the AIIB, Liu said he reiterated China's hopes for Korea to join the bank as a founding member. The AIIB, aimed at creating a new financial order centered around China, is opposed by the U.S. because it believes Beijing could use it for political purposes. Seoul will reportedly make its final decision on joining this new financial institution later this month. And all this comes just a day before U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell meets with South Korean officials. While Russell is widely expected to address these 2 sensitive issues, an official at Seoul's Foreign Ministry brushed off the speculations, saying that his visit has nothing to do with the THAAD deployment or the AIIB. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Well, senior officials from Korea and Japan are holding talks aimed at resolving the issue of Tokyo's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. The talks between Korea's chief delegate Lee Sang-deok and his Japanese counterpart Junichi Ihara started about 2 hours ago, or 3 hours ago rather. It's the 7th meeting of its kind, but the 2 sides have yet to make any substantial progress on the highly sensitive subject. Seoul has called on Tokyo to take sincere steps to compensate the aging victims, but Japan insists the matter was settled through a bilateral treaty signed in 1965. UN Secretary-General Ban Kimoon, who's visiting Japan, has urged the leaders of Korea, China, and Japan to resolve their disputes over history. Ban made the comment during an interview with Japan's NHK. He called on the Japanese leader in particular to have a broader, future-oriented vision toward resolving historical matters at the earliest date possible, pointing out that many see the 21st century being led by Asia-Pacific countries. He said it's imperative for the 3 nations to keep the peace and engage in mutual cooperation.
The annual session of China's top legislative body came to a close on Sunday. One of the key areas of focus this year, the economy, how to push ahead with sweeping reforms and reach a growth target of 7%. For more, here's our Sun Jung-in.
This year's National People's Congress session came to an end Sunday with a focus on maintaining the policy direction of what the leadership called the new normal. Under the conditions, the government aims to balance steady growth in a law-based society, which are the strategic goals President Xi Jinping has stuck to since taking power in 2012. The economy dominated the agenda as it comes at a time when China is wrestling with a continuing economic slowdown. Premier Li Keqiang said Beijing was prepared to take action to stimulate the economy and boost the market confidence, but warned the country would struggle to meet its annual growth target of around 7% this year.
It is true that we have adjusted downward our GDP growth target, but it will by no means be easy for us to meet this target because China's economic aggregate keeps expanding.
Lawmakers also put emphasis on deepening reforms and promoting the rule of law. The session reviewed a draft amendment to the country's legislation law in which it seeks to set clear limits on administrative power in order to protect public interest. The top judiciary also vowed greater justice by promoting transparency and sharing information between courts dotted around the country. Environmental protection was also high on the agenda as the Environment Ministry vowed comprehensive efforts to implement tougher measures against polluting firms. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
3 British teenagers are back in London now after an attempt to join Islamic State in Syria over the weekend was foiled. They were released after being questioned on suspicions of plotting terrorist acts. Our Shin Se-min has more.
3 British teenagers suspected of trying to enter Syria to join the Islamic State militant group have been returned to the UK and were released on bail late Sunday local time after being questioned by counterterrorism officers for 24 hours. The suspects, 2 17-year-old boys and 1 19-year-old man, all from London, were first reported missing late Friday night and were stopped by authorities in Turkey on suspicion of preparation to commit terrorist acts. It marks the first successful cooperation between the two countries on this issue, as the suspects were stopped by intelligence officials in Turkey after being alerted by British officials. The identities of the 3 haven't been disclosed. This case comes a matter of weeks after 3 British teenage girls traveled to join the jihadist group in Syria. Around 600 British nationals are believed to have already gone to Syria or Iraq to take up arms or become jihadi brides. Over in Iraq, the joint military Shia militia operation to free the city of Tikrit is taking a breather as they wait for reinforcements before they push to retake the entire city. Troops there have been slowed by sniper fire and booby-trap buildings. Meanwhile, Kurdish Peshmerga fighters are reporting that Islamic State militants could be using chlorine as chemical weapons in Iraq's north and west. Security forces have sealed off the area where the containers were found and alerted Baghdad authorities. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Authorities in the U.S. state of Missouri have made an arrest in last week's shooting in Ferguson, which left 2 police officers hit and wounded. 20-year-old Jeffrey Williams was arrested and charged on Saturday local time with 2 counts of first-degree assault, among others. St. Louis County Prosecutor Robert McCulloch said Williams had fired the shots from a moving vehicle outside the Ferguson police headquarters, where protesters were gathered. Authorities will now try to determine the motive behind the shooting, as Williams, who was on probation, claimed his target was not the officers but someone in the crowd with whom he had a dispute.
Our focus this time is Russia. A new documentary aired on that country's state TV showing President Vladimir Putin being more aggressive on Crimea and Ukraine, contrary to Moscow's articulated stance thus far. This piece, titled "The Path to the Motherland," President Putin says he had in fact ordered Crimea's annexation weeks before the region held a referendum. In Sunday's run of the documentary, the Russian leader says he was ready to put nuclear weapons on standby during the escalating tensions over Crimea and Ukraine, in both cases explaining that the lives of Russians and Moscow-backed leader Viktor Yanukovych were under threat. President Putin himself, meanwhile, has been out of the public eye since canceling a summit meeting with his Belarusian and Kazakh counterparts last week, sparking rumors that he was ill or out of the country. Well, if you're extremely indecisive and you're thinking about going green with your next auto purchase, this next report could help you make up your mind.
That's right. We're going to talk about hybrid cars. What pulls many back from buying hybrid cars, of course, is the cost, right?
And our Kim Ji-yeon takes a closer look on this week's industry insights, including the price tag.
Despite falling oil prices, Korean drivers are increasingly turning to hybrid cars, powered by a combination of gas and electricity. Around 5,200 hybrids were sold during the first 2 months of this year alone, led by Hyundai Motor's Sonata Hybrid. The driving force behind the hybrid's popularity is a change in public perception, as myths surrounding hybrids are debunked. When consumers hear the words electric vehicle, they think of plugs, cords, and wall sockets. But today's hybrids don't necessarily have to be plugged in. Auto engineers have developed a system known as regenerative braking that helps cars retrieve and store energy.
Energy normally lost when the car slows down or stops is reclaimed and sent to the rechargeable batteries. And then the gas engine also transfers energy to the batteries automatically.
Another common misconception is that hybrid drivers are paying more just to save the environment. But in reality, it's not all about altruism. Drivers can actually save when they go hybrid. The sticker price for a Sonata Hybrid starts at $27,000, just $1,800 more than a non-hybrid Sonata. Assuming gas price remains at $1.30 per liter, Hyundai says consumers can save nearly $3,200 over a 5-year period.
A drop in gas prices doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be cheaper to keep a gasoline-based model. Right now, gas is at about 1,471 or $1.30 per liter, which isn't cheap. And consumers think the low oil price trend isn't going to last long.
Also, drivers who buy a hybrid this year will be eligible for various local tax cuts and government subsidies. With hybrids that emit less than 97 grams of carbon dioxide per kilometer, which includes the Sonata Hybrid, Toyota's Prius line, the Lexus CT200H, and the Ford Fusion, drivers can save up to $3,600. Hyundai says it plans to boost the Sonata Hybrid's fuel efficiency by 25%. It's also planning to expand its lineup to draw the average driver, starting with its first plug-in hybrid set to debut at the Seoul Motor Show in April. Hyundai Motor Group Chairman Chung Mong-gu laid out plans to invest $73 billion into its facilities and R&D divisions through 2018. 85% of that will go towards improving standards, including plans to develop future hybrids. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Business partners face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Laah Hyun-kyung and Daniel Choy.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
Korea has opened its 7th Innovation Center, this time in the southeastern port city of Busan. In cooperation with retail giant Lotte Group, the Busan Center will set up a $200 million fund to offer counseling on product development and commercialization. It will also support the country's film industry by opening movie theaters to showcase films produced in connection with the government's recently opened Cultural Creativity Complex in Seoul. Marking the occasion, President Park said she expects the Busan Center to innovate Korea's retail and service sectors, establish an ecosystem for the Korean film industry, and foster startups based on Internet of Things technologies. Korea's finance minister has called on the leaders of Korea's public and private financial institutions to support the government's push for structural reforms. Speaking at a dinner in Seoul on Sunday, Choi Kyung-hwan said the companies should come up with new value-added services and create more employment opportunities in the financial sector. This comes as the number of jobs in the financial sector has been contracting in recent years. He also pointed out that the financial sector is only making up 5% of the country's GDP, far short of the government's 10% target rate.
The average growth rate of sales of non-financial listed companies has been decreasing for the past couple of years. And last year, it actually turned negative, with many manufacturers seeing their sales and profits slump. Our Song Ji-sun has more.
Korean manufacturers entered a phase of negative growth last year. According to the Federation of Korean Industries on Monday, sales of over 1,000 listed companies decreased 1.5% as of the third quarter of last year, compared to the same period a year earlier. Profit growth also slowed to negative 18% last year, from a 1% growth in 2013. The trend was more noticeable among manufacturers, which account for more than 70% of the firms surveyed. Their combined profit dropped from $75 to $62 billion, a 23% fall from a 9% expansion in 2013. 7 out of Korea's 10 largest companies in terms of revenue saw their profits drop 30% on average on slumping domestic demand, coupled with slowing exports due to weakened global demand. And that includes Korea's largest companies and conglomerates like Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor Group, SK, and Hanwha. Officials at the Federation of Korean Industries say manufacturers need government support for more business-friendly policies. They say such a slowdown could dent the pace of new job creation and facilities investment. Industry analysts point out that companies first need to restructure and cut costs to improve their profitability. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
And with a protracted economic slump, last year was a bad year for Korean companies in another aspect. In 2014, the number of Korean firms recording a decline in their credit ratings reached a 15-year high. The Korea Investor Service on Monday says only 15 of some 370 companies saw their credit ratings rise last year, while about 40 suffered a downgrade. The figures represent the lowest and highest within a 15-year period since the year 1999. By industry, manufacturing companies saw the largest number of ratings downgrades, followed by the services and financial sectors. The more shares held by foreign investors last year, the more likely it was for the local companies to boost their dividend payouts last year. This is in contrast to the lower dividend payments typical of Korean companies. Local market analyst Wise FN says of the combined $14 billion in dividends paid by 885 listed companies in Korea, around $5 billion was paid to foreigners. That's a near 19% increase from the previous year. This was more evident with Korean smartphone maker Samsung Electronics, which had 52% of its shares held by foreign investors last year. That's an increase of 3% from the previous year.
The competition in the job market for college graduates is growing fiercer by the day. It's getting to a point where students have to fight hard to get into school clubs focused on enhancing skills you would get at real workplaces. Kwon So-ah reports.
One of the excitements for a Korean freshman is participating in a 동아리, the Korean word for an extracurricular club at a university. And these days, the most popular clubs are those that will help students prepare for getting a job, such as management or startup clubs.
The open spots in our club filled up in just 5 days.
That's led to a fierce competition for entry to the clubs. What you see here is not a job interview. These seniors are testing freshmen on whether they are qualified to be a member of their group. All this competition seems to have helped, as many club members have successfully entered the workforce.
We believe that once we go through the club's curriculum and events, we build up the knowledge and traits that are needed in the workplace.
The rise in the number of these extracurricular clubs has followed the rise in Korea's youth unemployment rate, a problem that can't be solved solely by higher education. Despite a university entrance rate of around 70%, statistics show that it's not easy for members of the younger generation to get a job. According to Statistics Korea, the unemployment rate of young Koreans ages 15 to 29 hit a record high of over 9% last year. Still, the clubs may help with the job hunt, though there are drawbacks.
A university is not only a place to prepare for getting a job, it's a place to build up one's knowledge of the humanities and social relations.
Some have also expressed the worry that university students will have to face employment worries after graduation in any case, and that in the meantime, they won't get to enjoy just being a student. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Let's shift our focus to health and nutrition now. It's a widely known fact that bran works wonders for the human body. We're learning now that it may be even healthier than we'd ever imagined. A group of local researchers have discovered previously unknown properties of rice bran that could help prevent obesity. Our Paul Yi has more.
About 500,000 tons of rice bran is produced every year in Korea after rice is polished. 30% of the residue is used in cosmetics or livestock feed, while the rest is discarded. But a group of local researchers has recently discovered evidence that special properties in rice bran could be beneficial in preventing obesity. They released the results early this month. The researchers conducted an experiment in which a control group of mice was fed high-fat foods, while a test group was also fed high-fat foods but given an injection of rice bran extract. After 6 weeks, the mice in the control group gained 44% more weight, but the group that was given the rice bran injection showed a significant difference in weight gain of only 33%.
The mice given the rice bran extract injections gained significantly less weight, and there was a reduction in the amount of fat in the liver cells.
The difference was also noticeable in the size of fatty tissues and cells. The mice in the high-fat control group had enlarged cells, but the mice in the rice bran group saw no change in their fatty tissues. The researchers discovered that certain bioactive components in rice bran help decrease the proportion of fat in the body.
Through animal testing, we've proven that rice bran is effective in fighting obesity. It could be used to make health functional food or medicine.
After confirming the effectiveness and safety of rice bran in humans, the researchers anticipate the results will transform the unused raw material into a high-value product, all the while tackling the oversupply of rice in the country. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
And now on to the cultural front. One of the few video artists to have truly broken through to mainstream audiences has arrived in Seoul for a solo exhibition.
And I heard he can bend time or manipulate time with his works. His name is Viola, and our Lee Myun-hee shares some of his works with us in this next report.
Cascading in the wrong direction. Liquid flows from black to red to opaque white, finally becoming crystal clear. American video artist Viola has for many years experimented with time and the human experience, and the relationship between the two. He also points out how mass media has become a tool by which to witness the suffering of humanity.
Well, Buddha said, of course, all life is suffering. And a lot of other cultures have that same idea. Because we need to suffer.
There's a unique characteristic to all of his works. Images that invoke strong emotions and hints at a spiritual world in the midst of reality.
It's filmed very quickly, but it's shown at normal speed, so 1 minute is stretched to 10 minutes or even 80 minutes. It's a very special experience for the audience.
Viola even recreates the suffering of 4 martyrs, tortured by the 4 elements. And even though his works contain images of pain and sorrow, Viola wants them to represent the ideas of perseverance, endurance, and sacrifice in our mass media-dominated world. Lee Myun-hee, Arirang News.
It is hot. Warm? Hot?
Not
I would say
hot,
getting
not
pretty
to
hot.
the point where it's hot. No, I think it's warm. Yeah.
To me, it's getting hotter. Well, most regions saw the highest readings of the year today.
That's right. It's finally spring, isn't it? Southern parts of the country are seeing temperatures above 20 degrees Celsius. For details, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Good evening, guys. Well, the mercury is going up by the day, and now it's well above the seasonal averages. And as you mentioned, Hyun-kyung, most of the southern regions had daytime highs about 20 degrees, but you'll still want to keep in mind of the huge temperature drops into the evening. Now, the dry weather seems to be staying with us, but we also have this clear skies thanks to the high pressure trough. However, fine dust levels are looking a bit high on the Gangwon province, and that will carry over to the capital this evening. Now, it looks like we'll have a mild reading all week long, even with a spring shower expected nationwide on Wednesday. Now, not much rain is expected to fall in the capital, but there will be heavy amounts of rain down south. Now, hopefully, this will give some relief to the dryness of the weather. Now, with that in mind, let's take a look at the readings for tomorrow. So we'll start off the Tuesday morning at 6 and get up to 17 in the afternoon, while Daegu and Busan will top higher at 23 and 18 degrees. Moving over to other regions, Jeju gets up to 18, Dokdo hits down to 16, while Mangkeungang will be a bit cloudy at 8 degrees. Well, that's all for now, Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for that, Michelle. We've come to the end of our newscast. Have a great start to your day or a safe drive home. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. See you again tomorrow. Goodbye for now.